And more of Cassandra Ventura's text messages are being read, which would seem to suggest she wanted to participate or was willing to participate in the freak-offs. And if that's the case, again, you could have somebody who 99% of the time will agree to sexual intercourse. The one time they say no and it's imposed against them and they're sexually assaulted, that's sexual assault. That's it. The defense is focusing a lot on her being a willing participant, either as a form to, strike at her credibility or to say, she was a part of this. How effective is this?
It could be effective, right? These text messages definitely show kind of this eagerness to participate, the desire to be in his circle, the desire to be loved by him. And so, yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, those text messages I found were to be pretty damning and to show that she wanted to be in that situation. They do have evidence of that. Now, again, I go back to this video. The video is just so helpful to show that at some point she changed her mind. If she did, in fact, originally want to be a part of the freakouts, at some point later on down the road, she did not. And exactly what you said is true. If you agree to have consensual sex 99 times and then the 100th time you say no, it is rape. If you
Right.
are, so I do agree. The text messages are damning, but then again, she could have wisened up. She was a young girl. She could have taken a look around and realized, like, hey, this is really uncomfortable for me. This is not something I want to be a part of. And I'm putting my foot down now. And the second she put her foot down, that's when it becomes non-consensual.
Serena, we have a super chat question. Thank you so much for your support. Captain and Hard, this is a question. Do you think the defense will show abuse from Cassie to Diddy? I've seen interviews from old bodyguards that sometimes she would start fights. It's an interesting question because although a very different case, it was a civil case, why did Johnny Depp arguably win his case against Amber Heard? Because they were able to show that she seemingly abused him, right? And so I think that's an important question. What's your take on it, Serena?
I think you have to be delicate with this line of questioning if they were to go down that road. The Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, obviously, as you know, those were different. The elements that needed to be proven were different. Here, I don't know that if she started fights with him, that necessarily contradicts the case. It doesn't necessarily mean that she wasn't trafficked or that he didn't operate a RICO. I don't think anybody could credibly argue that just because she started fights, it meant that she had total control, both physical and mental, over her situation, such that she could have escaped at any time without any repercussions. I just don't see it. Even just the physicality, she's obviously smaller than he is. The power position is there. I think you could go there to try to say, oh, you're not such a great person either, but then you may alienate the jury by saying that. A jury might take a step back and be like, you know what? That's a little too far for me. She obviously was in the inferior position here. So I don't think it would be too successful.
We have an update from court. Sean Combs' lawyer, Anna Esteveo, asks Cassandra Ventura, you could have said yes or no, and you said love you. Ventura responds, there was no yes or no. Esteveo says, bring up B420 on page 2. Mr. Combs wrote, do I have your permission to set up freaky fun? You wrote ovulation, and then Ventura says yes. Again, going to this idea. This is going to be a very big theme about consent, because consent is arguably a defense to what we're talking about here. We have a question from Kempkin Lil Kemp Love. Serena, is Diddy credible considering he denied hitting women and advocated being against domestic violence? It's a good question.
It's an excellent question. And again, that goes back to kind of your ability or the prosecution's ability to show inconsistencies, right? Because inconsistencies not only shed doubt in a person's credibility for the instant matter, but it also sheds doubt as to whether they are a credible person in general, whether they should be believed in general. And so if he is somebody who has successfully lied in the past, right, he's convinced the world that he's against domestic violence and against battering women, and he's been so public about it, that tends to shed poor light on him later on down the road for the jury to look at, because now they could say, look, this guy is a professional liar. He's been able to convince people in the past about a certain position that he's taken. And yet here we are with uncontrovertible proof in the video that he absolutely has battered at least one woman at least one time in his life. And so I do think that using that against him is powerful.
Court update. This is from Estevao. Again, Anna Estevao representing Sean Combs, questioning Cassandra Ventura. Here, what do you say? Ventura says, I asked which hotel. I must have called him in between. I don't want to assume anything. Estevao asks, he said Montag. You said you could also go to Pleasure Chest. What would you get there? And Ventura says sexual supplies. You know, it was an interesting conversation. One of the questions we had earlier on in the week was, Serena, could she be charged, as an accomplice to this? Now, no, right? I mean, unless she was a part of allegedly abusing other people, you can't be an accomplice to your own abuse or alleged abuse. Then it's not really abuse.
Right. In a weird way, one could maybe take some mental gymnastics and say, well, she can't be a participant in her own abuse, but perhaps she was, part of this RICO conspiracy and, campaign to harm other people in
Or
some of the other
transportation
counts.
to
But I
engage in
think
prostitution. That could be another one, I guess.
exactly. But at this point, it's clear that the prosecution has drawn the line, has made their decision. She's not, they're considering her a victim. They are not considering her a participant. And frankly, if they've put her on the stand to testify about all of these things, then they've essentially given her immunity. So she will not be prosecuted for these crimes unless she would have waived immunity, which I am sure she did not.
Serena, we have a super chat question. Thank you so much from Zen Pi. If sex tapes exist, how can prosecutors prove they weren't staged, edited, or illegally obtained?
That's a good question. Sometimes prosecutors don't go the length and get a whole expert about how this is not AI, this is not tainted, this is not manipulated. But in today's day and age, it's true. I think people may have some questions about possible manipulation of tapes. And so what needs to happen is that tape needs to be authenticated, or that video needs to be authenticated by somebody, either the person who took the video, which if it's Diddy, you may never get him on the stand, or somebody who appeared in the video. So if Cassie, for example, is in the video, then she is a proper foundation witness to authenticate that video. What she would need to be able to tell a jury is, I've watched this video, I saw it the way that it's being presented to you, and I can authenticate that it is an accurate video and that it has not been manipulated, that this is what's called a fair and accurate depiction of exactly what happened. And so that's how the prosecution gets around those questions.
So another update from court. Ms. Estevao, this is Sean Combs' lawyer, asks, what supplies? Ventura responds, lubricants, outfits. Estevao says, he says, have fun, impress me. You say, okay. He says, can we kiss a lot? What do you say? Ventura says yes. So this is again talking about the conversation that she had with Sean Combs. Estevao says, you wrote, I left the iPad. Ventura says, I don't know whose iPad this meant. Okay, back here with Safa. Safa's back with us as well. So Safa, I was going to ask this. This is a question from Jesse Weber from Law&Crime. If the jury doesn't believe Cassandra Ventura, if they find her to be a weak witness, does that affect the rest of the prosecution's case? Because we expect Jane is going to testify. We expect Mia is going to testify. These other alleged victims. I don't know about alleged victim number 3. If they don't believe the star witness, does that catapult the entire prosecution case?
It's not going to catapult the entire prosecution case, but it's certainly going to do damage to the prosecution's case in chief. She is the star witness. She's the primary witness here. She is victim 1, and the prosecution is leading off with her because she is their strongest witness. So if the jurors find her uncredible, then that could present issues later. But we also have victim 2 and we also have victim 3. So victim 2 and victim 3 will also have the ability to get on the stand, testify, testify, tell their stories, and the jury, although they may not find Ms. Ventura credible, they could find victim 2 and or victim 3 credible, which would save the prosecution's case.
Then again, the jury might look at the prosecution a little skeptically if they're like, this is who you bring on and we don't necessarily believe. Now, I'm not saying that one way or another, because for the past 2 days, Cassandra Ventura has delivered quite compelling and graphic and disturbing testimony that raises the question, how on earth can someone actually consent to the things that she said she endured? And I'm not going to get into more detail about it. If you want to read it, you can check it out. I have a poll that came up, on YouTube, Law&Crime. Do you think Cassie's settlement suggests she was financially motivated? 34% say yes, 66% say no. Serena, what do you think about that? And what do you think about the settlement?
Well, I think that settlements are always fair game when it comes to cross-examination and determining somebody's credibility. However, in this case, the settlement already happened. Normally, in a situation where the settlement hasn't happened yet, somebody might be motivated to put forth criminal charges against somebody else in order to get that settlement down the road, right? Because the burden of proof in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's higher than in a civil case. And so, for example, if you go against somebody criminally and win, then you could essentially take that verdict and go right to civil court and say, look, I already have proof that this happened to me. The burden of proof in a criminal case is much higher than in a civil case. And so therefore, this person is guilty in the civil case as well. Now pay me. However, she's already gotten that favorable outcome. She's already gotten the settlement. So what is her incentive to now continue on, 8 months pregnant, going through all of this on the stand when she's already been paid out? So I think it actually helps her that the settlement already happened. And maybe somebody might on that jury infer from that settlement that he was guilty. Otherwise, he wouldn't have paid out.
Yeah, there's times when we have cooperating witnesses who are in the middle of litigation and they're questioned, well, you would definitely benefit from a guilty verdict here, wouldn't you? Well, different situation here. Okay, we got a super chat question from Ashley Glass. Ashley, thank you so much. Safa, how can she be seen as willing participating when she was allegedly blackmailed with videos and photos?
Well, that's going to be a question for the jury to decide. But the defense, what they're going to do and what they've been doing is highlighting the conversations via text message that show her initiation of certain freak offs or her initiation, maybe buying certain supplies or products and things like that. So that's what the defense is going to hang on to here with respect to that. And I expect that the prosecution is going to put on further evidence that would show, or that the jury could consider as blackmail, that would essentially go to a finding of guilt with respect to the charges, particularly the RICO and things of that nature. But the defense is really honing in on those text messages to show, yes, she was a participant. Yes, it was willingly because of the nature of the text messages, what she was saying to him, how she was initiating, and things like that.
Okay, we have more super chat questions coming in. Salis, thank you so much. Question for you, Serena. How does Cassie's long-term silence affect the strength of her claims now?
Another great question. And it's something that prosecutors deal with routinely with sex crimes victims, domestic violence victims. There is oftentimes a delayed outcry. Delayed outcry essentially just means that the victim takes time to tell somebody what happened, to come out and say what exactly went down. It is not at all uncommon for a domestic violence victim to not say something right away. Now, I don't know if that's something that's common knowledge to a jury. And so I think it would benefit the prosecution to bring an expert on to explain that, to say, in cases such as this, it is very, very common for people not to come out. And specifically in cases where the abuser is so powerful and has so much power over a person, money, manipulation ability over a person, even physical abuse over that person as a threat. So it's not uncommon for that delay, but I am sure the defense will try to use that in their favor.
We have another super chat question from Sarah F. Sarah, thank you so much. This is a great question, one we've been talking about a lot, but Saf, I'll throw it to you. Why are there no cameras allowed in the courtroom? And this is a federal case. Why are there no cameras allowed in the courtroom, Safa?
Unfortunately, the law says that cameras are not allowed in federal court. So there we have it. Although we would love to be able to see this in real time in the moment, sort of like we did in the Young Thug trial, that's just not the case here. Cameras are not allowed in a federal court.
So we have more updates from the live testimony of Cassandra Ventura because there are no cameras. We're reporting it in real time from what we're getting. Sean Combs' attorney, Miss Anna Estevao, asks Cassandra Ventura. Mr. Combs wrote, "I be there right after my session." This was in June 2017. "Do you remember arguments you were having at that time?" Ventura responds, "Not specifically." Estevao says, "Here you say the game starts at 10 p.m., no breaking character to 8 a.m. There's a follow-up. Ventura says, "This was a game a friend of mine told me, a way to rekindle your romance." Estevao says, "By doing something different in the bedroom." Ventura says, "It's a whole getting into character thing." Estevao says, Mr. Combs says, "Let's get some outfits and go to the sex club." So Safa, again, goes to this idea of her being a willing participant in all of this, that she wasn't coerced. I mean, because it does become a question that it's very possible that while she agreed to it in the beginning, she could have been hiding her true feelings, or she wasn't able to fully express how she was feeling, or didn't know how to. But that's a question, right? Because it becomes a question, how much does Sean Combs have to know how she was feeling about these sexual episodes and her participation with escorts? There's evidence that she made it clear, and there's evidence that he was physically violent, but how much does he have to actually know she didn't want this? So, Saf, I'll throw it to you.
I always say at the end of the day, unless the person is saying, yes, I want to do this, yes, I want to participate in this, then the answer is no. If they are silent as to whether or not they want to participate, the answer is no. That is not consent. If the person says, no, I don't want to do this, that is not consent. And at any point in time, and people don't often realize this, is although there may have been a sexual relationship between the two, preliminarily or at the beginning for a certain amount of time, a person can withdraw their consent. They can change their mind, and they have the right to change their mind. So that's definitely going to be something here that the jury is going to want to pay attention to. And I do think that there was a point in time where Miss Ventura was a participant of this because of her age, because of influence, and she may have had motives with respect to her career to participate in this. However, later down the line, as things became violent, she was no longer a willing participant. And that's what the prosecution is going to come behind the defense and say during their rebuttal and rehabilitation of Ms. Ventura.
Look, this is a complicated case. It's a complicated case. This is going to be a very interesting cross-examination to follow. We have been following it. But listen, we got to wrap things up. Serena Townsend, Safa Robinson-Ferrer, thank you so much for taking the time to come on, break down what is happening in court, answering our terrific questions from our viewers. Thank you both so much. And real quick, everybody, I also want to let everybody know we're going to continue to do these lunchtime shows for you. We're going to continue to break down this testimony in real time. And one of the reasons we can do this and take your great questions and bring this content to you is because we get amazing support from our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm. Give you an idea about who we're talking about here. Morgan & Morgan, they secured a $6 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, $13 million for a wrongful auto death in Georgia, and another $6 million for a trucking accident in New York. And mind you, this was all after insurance offered their clients significantly less in each of these cases. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Because Morgan & Morgan, I'll tell you what, they make it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. Everything from signing documents, uploading documents, talking to your legal team can all be done from your phone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LCLive by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jesse Weber. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. We'll have a lot more content for you on our various shows, including Sidebar, when it comes to the Sean Diddy Combs case. Stay with us. Thanks so much.